Epictetus, the slave who became free and what he taught us about the chains we choose. You are not in chains. No one has taken your freedom. No one has locked your door, bound your hands, or told you where you must be and what you must do every waking hour of your life. And yet, you wake up angry because of something someone said 3 days ago. You spend hours paralyzed by what someone thinks of you. You make decisions based on fear of what people will say. You stay in situations that hurt you because leaving feels too uncomfortable. You react, immediately, automatically, without choice, to every provocation, every slight, every moment that doesn't go the way you wanted. You are not in chains. But are you actually free? Because there is a man, born over 2,000 years ago, who would look at the way most of us live and say, quietly, without cruelty but without softness either, you have built your own prison. And you carry it with you everywhere you go. His name was Epictetus. And he knows something about chains. He was born into literal slavery. Owned. Property. A human being with no rights, no freedom, no control over where he went, what he did, or what was done to him. And from inside conditions most of us cannot imagine, he became the freest person in the room. Every room. For the rest of his life. This is not an inspirational story about rising above circumstances. This is something harder and more important than that. This is a precise, practical, unflinching examination of the real chains, the ones we build ourselves, inside our own minds, out of our own unexamined emotions, and exactly how to break them. 1 hour. 8 chapters. No shortcuts. Welcome to Iron Mind. The boy who was owned. Let's begin at the beginning. Because Epictetus's origin story is not background, it is the entire foundation of everything he taught. It is approximately 50 AD. The Roman Empire is at its height. Nero, the same emperor who would later order Seneca's death, sits on the throne. And somewhere in the city of Hierapolis, in what is now modern Turkey, a boy is born into slavery. We don't know his birth name. Epictetus is a Greek word that simply means acquired. The name given to him by his owners. A name that is not really a name at all. A label. A designation of property. He is owned, from the moment of his birth, by a man named Epictetus, a freedman himself who has risen to become a secretary in Nero's imperial court. Wealthy. Connected. Powerful in the specific, dangerous way that proximity to Nero made people powerful. Epictetus grows up in this household. He has no rights. His time is not his own. His body is not his own. The decisions about his life, where he goes, what he does, what happens to him, belong entirely to someone else. And then, in an event that the ancient sources record with disturbing casualness, his master decides to test the limits of his endurance. Epictetus twists Epictetus's leg. Deliberately. Perhaps as punishment, perhaps as a demonstration of power, perhaps simply because he could. Epictetus, according to the story that has been passed down, looks at his master calmly and says, "You are going to break it." Epictetus continues. The leg breaks. And Epictetus says, "Did I not tell you that you were going to break it?" No rage. No begging. No collapse into despair. Just clarity. Observation. The almost supernatural calm of someone who has already, at a level most of us never reach, separated what is happening to his body from what is happening inside his mind. This moment, this single exchange, contains the entire philosophy of Epictetus in compressed form. His body could be broken. His leg, his freedom of movement, his physical comfort, all of these were in Epictetus's power. His response. His judgment. His inner state. His choice of how to meet what was happening to him. These were not. These were his. Completely, irrevocably, permanently his. And no one, not a master, not an emperor, not any external force in the known world, could take them. Somehow, the ancient sources are not entirely clear on the mechanism. Epictetus gains his freedom. Perhaps Epictetus, in one of his more generous moments, frees him. Perhaps the case following Nero's death disrupts the household enough that Epictetus finds his way out. The historical record is incomplete. What we know is that at some point, Epictetus becomes a freedman. And immediately, with the focused urgency of someone who has spent years watching other people waste the freedom they take for granted, he goes to study philosophy. He attaches himself to Musonius Rufus, one of the most respected Stoic teachers in Rome. He is, by all accounts, a remarkable student. Not because he is the most naturally brilliant, though he is clearly gifted, but because he applies the philosophy with an intensity that comes from somewhere his fellow students, born free, simply don't have access to. He has already lived the alternative. He knows, not theoretically, not abstractly, but in his bones, in his broken leg, in every year of his own life, what it means to have no freedom. To be entirely at the mercy of external forces. To have your body, your time, your circumstances controlled by someone else. And because he knows that from the inside, because he has lived the full reality of external slavery, he understands with absolute clarity what so many free people miss entirely. The most dangerous slavery is not external. It is internal. The chains that most people carry, the ones that limit their lives, steal their peace, make them reactive and miserable and small, are not imposed from outside. They are built from within. From unexamined emotions. From automatic reactions. From the desperate, exhausting need for external approval. From the fear of discomfort. From the inability to sit with uncertainty. From the habit of outsourcing your inner peace to circumstances you cannot control. Epictetus, the man who knows what real chains feel like, looks at this and says, "You are doing this to yourself. And you can stop." The philosophy of freedom, what Epictetus actually taught. Epictetus eventually establishes his own school, first in Rome, then in Nicopolis in northwestern Greece, after the Emperor Domitian expels all philosophers from Rome. And what he teaches there, in conversations recorded by his student Arian, compiled into what we now call the Discourses and the Enchiridion, is not comfortable. It is not designed to make you feel good about yourself in the short term. It is designed to set you free. And freedom, Epictetus insists from the very first page, begins with a single, fundamental distinction. He calls it the most important idea in all of philosophy. Some things are up to us. Some things are not up to us. Up to us, our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions. In short, our inner life. How we think. What we value. How we respond to what happens to us. Not up to us, our body, our reputation, our property, our position. In short, everything external. Everything that exists in the world outside our own mind. This distinction, so simple it sounds almost trivial when you first hear it, is, when genuinely internalized and applied, one of the most radical and transformative ideas a human being can encounter. Because most of us, without realizing it, without ever having examined the assumption, are living as if the opposite were true. We are treating external things as if they are up to us, frantically trying to control outcomes, other people's opinions, circumstances that are fundamentally beyond our reach. And we are treating internal things, our own responses, our own judgments, our own emotional reactions, as if they are not up to us. As if they simply happen to us, automatically, inevitably, beyond our power to influence. Epictetus says, you have it exactly backwards. The external world, largely not yours to control. Accept it. Work with it. But stop expending your primary energy trying to manage what you fundamentally cannot manage. Your inner world, entirely yours. Always. Without exception. Regardless of circumstances. This is where your energy belongs. This is where your freedom lives. Now let's talk about emotions specifically. Because this is where Epictetus gets most misunderstood, and where his actual teaching is most urgently needed. The common misreading of Stoicism, especially on this point, is that Stoics don't feel emotions. That the goal is to become emotionally flat. Neutral. Unaffected. Epictetus would laugh at this. He felt deeply. He cared passionately about his students, about philosophy, about the question of how to live well. He was capable of grief, of joy, of genuine anger at injustice. What he was not was enslaved to those feelings. And the distinction is everything. Being enslaved to an emotion means, the emotion arrives, and you have no choice. It takes over. It drives your behavior. It makes your decisions for you. It determines how you treat people, what you say, what you do, how you spend your hours. You are, in that moment, not the driver of your own life, the emotion is. Being free from emotional slavery does not mean feeling nothing. It means, the emotion arrives, you feel it fully, and you retain the capacity to choose your response. The emotion informs you. It does not command you. That space, between the stimulus and the response, is where freedom lives. And Epictetus's entire teaching is, in one sense, a detailed instruction manual for how to create and expand that space. He uses a word that is central to understanding his philosophy, proheresis. It is a Greek word that doesn't have a perfect English equivalent. It means something like moral choice, or faculty of choice, but deeper than either of those translations suggests. It is the part of you that chooses, that deliberates, that stands between what happens and what you do about it. Your proheresis is, for Epictetus, the only thing that is truly and completely yours. Your body can be hurt. Your reputation can be damaged. Your property can be taken. Your circumstances can be changed by forces entirely outside your control. But your proheresis, your capacity to choose your response, your values, your judgments, belongs to no one but you. And here is the devastating implication. Every time you let an emotion drive your behavior without examination, every time you react automatically, every time you say he made me angry, or she made me feel worthless, or that situation made me anxious, you are voluntarily handing your proheresis to something outside yourself. You are, in the most literal sense Epictetus understood, enslaving yourself. Not because someone forced you, but because you forgot that the choice was yours. Let's make this concrete. Because philosophy that doesn't touch real life is just vocabulary. Someone says something cruel to you. An insult. A dismissal. A betrayal. What happens next, in the standard, unexamined, automatic response, is this: the words arrive, and something inside you immediately reacts. Anger surges. Or shame. Or fear. Or some combination of all three. And that emotional state drives what happens next, what you say, what you do, how you treat yourself and others for the rest of that day. The cruel words caused the anger. The anger caused the behavior. You were, in that chain of events, not really the author of your own actions. Epictetus breaks that chain. He says, the words arrived. That is the external event, not in your control. What you added to those words, the judgment that they matter, the interpretation that they are true, the decision that they have the power to define your state, that is yours. Always yours. Someone calls you worthless. The words are external, not in your control. The judgment that those words are true, that is yours. The decision to believe them, that is yours. The choice to let them determine how you feel about yourself, that is yours. And it can be unmade. Not immediately. Not without practice. Not without years of patient, daily work on your own inner life. But it can be unmade. That is the whole point. The chains we build ourselves. Epictetus taught for decades. And across those decades, in conversations with students who came from all over the Roman world, from all kinds of backgrounds, carrying all kinds of struggles, he identified the specific emotional patterns that enslave people most completely. Not abstract philosophical problems. Real, specific, recognizable patterns. The ones you know from the inside. Let's go through the most important ones. The first chain, the need for approval. Of all the emotional slaveries Epictetus encountered in his students, this one concerned him most deeply. Because it is the most invisible, the most socially reinforced, and the most completely self-defeating. The need for approval, the desperate, consuming hunger for other people to think well of you, to validate you, to confirm that you are enough, is, Epictetus argues, the most efficient way to surrender your freedom entirely. Because other people's opinions are, by definition, not in your control. You cannot make someone think well of you. You can act with integrity, treat people with respect, do your best work, and some people will still think poorly of you. Some people will misunderstand you. Some people will judge you through the lens of their own insecurities, their own agendas, their own limitations. And if your peace, your sense of worth, your ability to feel okay about yourself, is contingent on those people's approval, then your peace is hostage. Permanently. To something you can never fully control. Epictetus had seen what real hostage-taking looked like. He had lived it. And he had zero patience for the self-imposed version. He writes in the Enchiridion, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." Applied to approval-seeking, stop trying to make people see you the way you want to be seen. Start focusing on actually being the person you want to be. The opinion is outside your control. The character is not. This is not indifference to others. This is not the cold, disconnected stance of someone who doesn't care what anyone thinks. It is something more demanding and more honest, the recognition that genuine self-worth, the kind that actually holds up under pressure, cannot be built from the outside in. It can only be built from the inside out. From your own values, your own actions, your own honest assessment of who you are and how you are living. When your self-worth is built there, on something actually within your control, no one's opinion can touch it. Not because you don't hear it, but because it doesn't have anywhere to land. The second chain, anger. Epictetus was remarkably direct about anger. Not gentle, not diplomatic, direct. He considered unexamined anger one of the clearest signs of philosophical immaturity. Not because anger itself is wrong, but because the way most people experience anger reveals the core confusion at the heart of their suffering. When you are angry, Epictetus asks, what is the anger actually about? Almost always, it is about something outside your control not going the way you wanted. Someone treated you unfairly. The situation didn't resolve the way you expected. Someone broke a promise. Someone behaved badly. All of these things are, to varying degrees, outside your control. You cannot make people be fair. You cannot make situations resolve as you'd prefer. You cannot make people keep their promises. And the anger, the hot, consuming, energy-devouring anger, is your mind's protest against this reality. Its insistence that things should be different than they are. That the external world should conform to your expectations. It won't. It never will. And every hour spent in anger about it is an hour of your own freedom voluntarily surrendered. Epictetus is not saying, don't notice injustice. Don't respond to wrongdoing. Don't have standards for how people treat you. He is saying, the anger, the consuming, reactive, automatic anger, does not serve you. It does not change the situation. It does not make the person who wronged you feel the appropriate consequences. It does not produce justice. It only chains you to the very thing you are angry about, keeping you connected to it, giving it continued power over your inner state long after the event itself is over. The free response is not suppression. It is not pretending the anger isn't there. It is examination. It is looking at the anger clearly and asking, what judgment am I making here? What am I insisting should be different? And is that insistence serving me, or enslaving me? The third chain, fear of discomfort. This is perhaps the most pervasive emotional chain in modern life. And Epictetus, who had experienced levels of physical and psychological discomfort that most of us will never approach, was merciless about it. The fear of discomfort, the automatic, reflexive avoidance of anything that might be hard, uncomfortable, uncertain, or painful, is, he argues, the single greatest limiter of human potential. Not external circumstances. Not lack of talent or opportunity or resources. The internal flinch. the retreat from discomfort before it has even fully arrived. He writes, "It is not death or pain that is to be feared, but the fear of pain or death. The actual discomfort, the difficult conversation, the uncertain outcome, the risk of failure, the possibility of rejection, is almost always manageable. Almost always survivable. Almost always far less terrible in reality than in the anticipation. But the fear of the discomfort? That is what actually destroys people. Because the fear keeps you in situations that hurt you, because leaving feels uncomfortable. It keeps you from saying what needs to be said, because confrontation feels uncomfortable. It keeps you from taking the risks that could change your life, because failure feels uncomfortable. The fear of discomfort is not protecting you. It is imprisoning you. And the only way out, the only way Epictetus ever found, and the only way the evidence of human experience consistently confirms, is through. Face the discomfort. Do it anyway. Watch it be survivable. And then do it again, and again, and again, until the fear of it loses its power over you completely. The fourth chain, attachment to outcomes. This one is subtle. And it is, for high-achieving, driven, ambitious people, exactly the kind of person drawn to iron mind, the most dangerous chain of all. Because it hides inside something that looks like virtue. You care deeply about your work. You are invested in the outcomes of your efforts. You want things to go well, for yourself, for the people you care about, for the projects and goals you've dedicated yourself to. This is not weakness. This is passion. This is engagement with life. But Epictetus draws a precise, critical distinction. There is a difference between caring about the quality of your effort and being emotionally dependent on the outcome of that effort. You can, and should, give everything to the work. Prepare completely. Execute with full commitment. Do everything within your power to produce the best possible result. And then, release the outcome. Completely. Because the outcome, once your effort is given, is no longer in your control. It is subject to timing, circumstance, other people's choices, luck, and 1,000 other variables that no amount of anxious attachment will influence. The person who is attached to outcomes, who cannot feel okay until the result confirms their effort was worthwhile, is on a permanent emotional roller coaster. Their inner state is hostage to external results. Every success brings temporary relief. Every failure brings disproportionate devastation. The person who is free from outcome attachment, who gives everything to the effort and then genuinely releases the result, is, paradoxically, often more effective. Because they are not distracted by anxiety about the outcome while they are still doing the work. And they are not destroyed by failure when it comes, because their sense of worth was never located in the outcome to begin with. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. That is Epictetus. That is freedom from the fourth chain. Open Book Chapter 4, The School in Nicopolis, where freedom was taught, 2400 hours, 32:00. After Domitian expels philosophers from Rome, Epictetus settles in Nicopolis, a small city in northwestern Greece, founded by Augustus Caesar to commemorate his victory at the Battle of Actium. And there, in this relatively quiet, provincial city, far from the power and noise of Rome, he builds something extraordinary. A school. Simple. Unadorned. Nothing like the grand philosophical academies of the Greek tradition. No marble halls, no wealthy patrons, no elaborate rituals. Just a man, a room, and students who come from across the Roman world to learn how to be free. And they do come. From everywhere. Rich and poor, Roman and Greek, slave and freedman and senator. Something about Epictetus, something in the combination of his intellectual precision and the undeniable authenticity of his lived experience, draws people who are genuinely hungry for what he is offering. Not comfort. Not validation. Not philosophical entertainment. Truth. The specific, difficult, life-changing truth about what is actually within their power and what they are needlessly suffering over. His student Arion, a young man of considerable intelligence and privilege who will go on to become a successful historian and general, is so struck by Epictetus's teaching that he begins recording the conversations verbatim. Not as a formal academic exercise but because, as he explains in his preface, reading the words later produces something close to the experience of actually being there. The Discourses, 4 books of these recorded conversations, along with the shorter Enchiridion, a kind of philosophical handbook compiled from the Discourses, are what we have of Epictetus's teaching. And they are unlike almost any other philosophical text from antiquity, because they are not polished. They are not edited into smooth, finished arguments. They are conversations, dynamic, sometimes confrontational, frequently funny, always direct. Epictetus challenging his students, pushing back on their self-deceptions, refusing to let them hide behind clever reasoning when the real issue is that they are afraid. He asks one student, "Why do you say you want to be free, but everything you do chases after the approval of others?" He tells another, "You say you are a philosopher. Show me. Not in words, in how you live." He is not interested in philosophy as an intellectual game. He is interested in philosophy as a technology for living. A practical system for being actually, genuinely, demonstrably free, in the specific, difficult, and perfect conditions of an actual human life. One of the most striking things about Epictetus's teaching, and one of the things that makes it so relevant to the specific struggles of young people today, is his insistence on the relationship between self-knowledge and freedom. You cannot be free from your emotions if you do not understand them. And most people, most of us, do not understand our own emotional patterns with any real precision. We experience them. We are carried along by them. But we have not sat down and examined them carefully enough to see what they are actually made of. Epictetus pushes his students to do exactly this. When you feel angry, what is the judgment underneath the anger? What are you insisting should be different? Is that insistence rational? Is it serving you? When you feel anxious, what are you afraid of losing or not getting? Is that thing actually in your control? Is the anxiety changing anything, or just making you suffer? When you feel the desperate need for someone's approval, whose approval is it? Why does this specific person's opinion carry so much weight? What would it mean if they disapproved, and is that actually as catastrophic as it feels? These questions, asked honestly, with genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness, are the beginning of real self-knowledge. And self-knowledge, Epictetus argues, is the prerequisite for freedom. You cannot free yourself from a chain you haven't noticed. You cannot change a pattern you haven't examined. You cannot choose your response to something you haven't understood. This is why philosophy, for Epictetus, is not an academic subject. It is a practice of radical self-examination. A daily, ongoing, unflinching investigation of your own inner life, what you value, what you fear, what you are reacting to and why. The unexamined life, as Socrates famously said, is not worth living. Epictetus, who had experienced, from the inside, what it means to have no external freedom whatsoever, would add, the unexamined emotional life is not freedom. Regardless of what your circumstances look like from the outside. Let's talk about one of the most powerful teaching moments recorded in the Discourses. A student comes to Epictetus deeply distressed. His brother is angry with him. The relationship is damaged. The student is consumed by the situation, anxious, reactive, unable to think clearly about anything else. Epictetus listens, and then asks one question. What part of this is in your control? The student begins listing things. What he said. What he should have said differently. What his brother is thinking. Whether his brother will forgive him. What people will say about the conflict. Whether the relationship can be repaired. Epictetus stops him. Which of those things are actually in your control? The student pauses. And begins slowly to separate the list. His own words going forward, in his control. His own behavior toward his brother, in his control. His own sincerity in attempting repair, in his control. His brother's response, not in his control. His brother's feelings, not in his control. The outcome of the situation, not in his control. And Epictetus says, then focus entirely on the first list. Give your complete attention and energy to what is yours. And genuinely, fully, release everything on the second list. Not because it doesn't matter, but because your suffering over it changes nothing except your own peace. This is the teaching. Simple. Repeatable. Applicable to almost every situation that causes human suffering. What is mine? What is not mine? Give everything to the first. Release the second. Not once. Not as a technique you apply in calm moments, but as a daily, hourly, sometimes minute-by-minute practice of returning to what is actually within your power. The self you think you are. We need to go somewhere deeper now. Somewhere Epictetus takes his most advanced students. The place where the philosophy stops being about managing emotions and starts being about examining the self that is doing the managing. Because there is a chain beneath all the other chains. A slavery beneath all the other slaveries. And it is this, the unexamined belief about who you are. Most people carry, somewhere at the center of their inner life, a fixed story about themselves. About what they are capable of, what they deserve, what kind of person they are at their core. I am someone who gets overwhelmed. I am someone who needs reassurance. I am someone who can't handle conflict. I am someone who always ends up alone. I am someone who isn't smart enough, strong enough, good enough. These stories, carried unconsciously, reinforced by every experience that seems to confirm them, used to explain and excuse behavior that could actually be changed, are the deepest chains of all. Because they are invisible. At least the other chains, the anger, the approval-seeking, the fear of discomfort, you can see those in action. You can catch them, examine them, work with them. But the story you have about yourself, the fundamental identity you inhabit, that feels like truth. Not a story. Not a choice. Just reality. Epictetus would sit across from you and say, with the calm authority of a man who rebuilt his entire identity from the wreckage of slavery, it is a story. And stories can be rewritten. Not easily. Not quickly. Not without sustained, honest, sometimes painful examination. But the person you believe yourself to be is not fixed. It is not written in your biology, or your past, or your circumstances. It is a collection of habits, interpretations, and conclusions, built up over years, that can be examined, challenged, and changed. The Stoics called this provocation, self-attention. The continuous, disciplined practice of watching your own mind. Not identifying with every thought and feeling that arises, but standing slightly back from them, observing them, examining them, choosing which ones to act on and which ones to let pass. You are not your anger. You are the one who notices the anger. You are not your anxiety. You are the one who observes the anxiety. You are not your self-critical story. You are the one who can choose whether to believe it. This distinction, between the thoughts and feelings that arise, and the awareness that notices them, is, for Epictetus, the location of real freedom. Because the thoughts and feelings are often not in your control. They arise from conditioning, from biology, from past experience. You cannot always stop them from appearing. But whether you identify with them, whether you take them as truth, whether you let them drive your behavior, that is always, always a choice. Your proheresis. Your faculty of choice. The one thing that is unconditionally yours. Epictetus makes a distinction in the discourses that is one of the most useful things I have ever encountered in all of philosophy. He distinguishes between the impression and the assent. The impression is what arrives, the thought, the feeling, the interpretation of an event. It comes automatically. You didn't choose it. It just appears. The assent is what you do with it, whether you agree with it, believe it, act on it. The assent is chosen. Always. Someone criticizes your work. The impression arrives. This means I am incompetent. That impression was automatic. You didn't choose it. But the assent, whether you agree that the criticism means you are incompetent, that is yours. You can examine it. You can ask, is this actually true? Is this a fair assessment? Is this one person's opinion or a reliable measure of reality? Someone ignores you at a social gathering. The impression arrives: they don't like me. I am unlikable. Automatic. Not chosen. But the assent, whether you accept that interpretation as true, whether you let it collapse your self-worth for the rest of the evening, that is yours. The gap between impression and assent, tiny, almost imperceptible in moments of emotional intensity, is where your entire freedom lives. Epictetus's practice is, in one sense, simply the daily widening of that gap. Making it larger. More spacious. Creating more room between what arrives and what you do about it. More room for choice. More room for reason. More room for the person you actually want to be, rather than the automatic, reactive, habitual person that your unexamined patterns produce. The practical system, Epictetus's daily tools for emotional freedom. Philosophy without practice, Epictetus insisted, is not philosophy at all. It is entertainment. Intellectual decoration. He was contemptuous of students who could recite Stoic principles brilliantly in the classroom, and then went home and were enslaved to every petty emotion and social anxiety that crossed their path. "Show me that you have profited," he said. "Show me not in words but in deeds." So here are the deeds. The specific, practical, daily tools that Epictetus developed, and that, applied consistently over time, will do what he promised. Make you free. Tool 1. The morning examination. Before Epictetus began any day, before he engaged with the world, with its demands and provocations and opportunities, he examined his own inner state. Not in a vague, unfocused way. With specific, directed questions. What impressions am I likely to face today that will tempt me to react rather than respond? Where am I most likely to hand my proheresis over to something external? What is my intention for how I want to meet today's difficulty? This practice, 5 to 10 minutes of honest, directed self-examination before the day begins, does something that nothing else can do. It converts the day from something that happens to you into something you are actively participating in. You are not caught off guard by your own reactions. Because you have already anticipated them. Already prepared your response. Already decided, in advance of the provocation, who you want to be when it arrives. Start tonight. Tomorrow morning, before your phone, before social media, before the day's noise has a chance to rush in, sit with these 3 questions. Write the answers down if you can. The act of writing makes it real in a way that thinking alone does not. Tool 2. The impression audit. Throughout the day, whenever you notice a strong emotional reaction arising, pause. Just for a moment. Just long enough to create the gap between impression and assent. Ask, what is the impression here? What is the automatic interpretation my mind has produced? Name it. Specifically? Not, I'm upset, but, my mind is telling me that this person's comment means they don't respect me. Then ask, is this impression accurate? Is this interpretation the only possible reading of what just happened? Is there another way to see this? And finally, do I assent to this? Is this the story I choose to act from? This does not make the emotion disappear. It does not make the situation easier. But it creates a moment of genuine choice in what would otherwise be an automatic chain of reaction. That moment of choice is everything. Practice it every day. Every time you catch a strong impression, pause. Name it. Examine it. Choose. Over weeks and months, the pause becomes more natural. The examination becomes faster. The choice becomes more real. Tool 3. The ownership inventory. This is Epictetus's core practice, the dichotomy of control, applied as a structured daily exercise. Once a day, in the evening works well, take whatever has been weighing on you, whatever has caused anxiety or anger or upset, and divide it into 2 columns. Column 1, what is actually in my control here? Column 2, what is not in my control here? Be ruthlessly honest. Most people, when they actually do this exercise, discover that column 2 is enormous, full of things they have been spending enormous mental and emotional energy on, and column 1 is smaller than they expected but completely actionable. Then, make a specific plan for column 1. What will you actually do about the things that are within your power? And for column 2, practice the release. Not suppression. Not pretending you don't care. But the genuine, deliberate, chosen act of withdrawing your energy from what you cannot change. This is not passivity. This is efficiency. This is redirecting your limited energy, your attention, your emotional resources, your time, from where it is wasted to where it can actually make a difference. Tool 4. The role practice. Epictetus used a theatrical metaphor that his students found both amusing and deeply useful. He said, "Life is like a play, and you have been assigned a role. You did not choose the role. Your circumstances, your background, your body, your temperament were given to you. But how you play the role, that is entirely yours. A slave plays their role well. A free person plays their role well. A person born into difficulty plays their role well. The quality of the performance, the integrity, the commitment, the character brought to whatever circumstances you've been given, that is always in your control." Applied practically, when you are in a situation that is provoking strong emotion, ask, "What role am I playing here? And how does the best version of that role respond?" Not, "How do I feel?" but "What does this role, played with integrity and wisdom, look like in this moment?" This small shift, from reactive identity to deliberate performance, creates enormous space for choice. Tool 5. The evening release. At the end of each day, Epictetus recommended a practice of deliberate release. Review the day. Not with judgment, with curiosity. Where did you hand your freedom over? Where did an impression arrive and you assented to it automatically, without examination? Note it. Not as evidence of failure, as information. Data about your specific patterns, your specific triggers, the specific impressions that most consistently bypass your reason and drive your reactions. Then, deliberately, consciously, release the day. Not every emotion needs to be carried into tomorrow. Not every reaction needs to be analyzed indefinitely. Note it, learn from it, and let it go. Tomorrow is a new opportunity to practice. To widen the gap. To choose more deliberately. The evening release is the preparation for the morning examination. Together, they form the daily rhythm of a person who is genuinely, actively working toward freedom. Tool 6. The discomfort practice. Like Marcus Aurelius, like Seneca, Epictetus believed strongly in voluntary discomfort as a tool for building emotional resilience. But Epictetus had a specific reason for this practice that goes beyond the others. He had been a slave. He knew, from the inside, that external conditions could be made genuinely terrible. And he had discovered, from the inside, that even in genuinely terrible external conditions, the inner life could remain free. That discovery, that the worst they could do to him did not touch the most important part of him, was the foundation of his entire philosophy. And the voluntary discomfort practice is a way of proving this to yourself, in controlled, chosen conditions, before life forces the proof in uncontrolled ones. Choose something uncomfortable. Something you've been avoiding. Something that provokes the flinch, the retreat, the desire to stay safe. And do it. On purpose. Not because suffering is good, but because on the other side of the voluntary discomfort is a version of you that has proven, to yourself, in your own lived experience, that discomfort is survivable. That the fear of it was bigger than the reality of it. That you are more capable of handling difficulty than your avoidance has been allowing you to believe. Every voluntary discomfort is a link in the chain of your own freedom. The lame philosopher and the emperor, the unlikely connection. Here is one of the most remarkable facts in all of ancient philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, the most powerful person in the known world, read Epictetus. Studied him. Was profoundly shaped by him. In the Meditations, Marcus quotes Epictetus more than any other source. Returns to his ideas repeatedly. In some of his most important passages, the ones where he is working out the core principles of how to live, you can hear Epictetus's voice directly beneath his. Think about what this means. A man born into slavery. A man whose leg was broken by his master. A man who owned nothing, controlled nothing, had no power over his own life in any external sense. And the most powerful man in the world is reading his words by lamplight in a military tent and finding in them the guidance he needs to govern an empire. The lame philosopher and the emperor. Two men at opposite ends of every external measure of status and power. And both of them, in their different circumstances, working on exactly the same thing. The inner citadel. The proheresis. The gap between impression and assent. The daily practice of choosing freedom in whatever conditions life had placed them in. This is the thing that Epictetus's life proves beyond any argument. Freedom is not a function of circumstances. You can be a slave in a palace, owned by your need for approval, driven by your unexamined fears, reacting automatically to every provocation, never once genuinely choosing your own response. You can be a free person in a cell, owning your judgments, choosing your values, maintaining the inner citadel regardless of what happens to your body or your external circumstances. The location of freedom was never outside you. It has always been, only ever been, in here. Epictetus lived to old age. He was never wealthy. He lived simply, famously so, in a small house with minimal possessions, which he reportedly left unlocked because there was nothing worth stealing. He never married young. The ancient sources suggest he took a companion in old age to help care for a friend's child he had adopted. He had no political power, no armies, no territory. And by every account we have, in the descriptions of his students, in the respect of contemporaries, in the way Marcus Aurelius treats his ideas as foundational, he was one of the freest, most genuinely at peace human beings of his time. Not because his life was easy. It wasn't. Not because circumstances were kind to him. They weren't. But because he had done the work. The daily, unglamorous, repetitive work of examining his own inner life, catching his own patterns, widening the gap between impression and assent, and choosing, day after day, year after year, who he wanted to be. That work produced something no external circumstance could touch. It produced a free man. And the instructions he left behind, recorded by a student who recognized their value, are the same instructions available to you. Right now. Today. In your specific circumstances, with your specific emotional patterns, with your specific chains. The work is the same. The freedom is the same. And it has always been closer than you think. The iron mind, your chains, your choice. You have spent an hour with Epictetus. With a man who had every reason, by any external measure, to be broken. To be bitter. To be consumed by the injustice of his circumstances, the pain of his body, the humiliation of his status. And who chose, instead, to be the freest person in the room. Not because he was special. Not because he had some natural gift for equanimity that the rest of us lack. But because he understood something, clearly, precisely, from the inside, that most people spend their entire lives missing. The chains that actually limit your life are not outside you. They are not the difficult circumstances. Not the people who have wronged you. Not the opportunities you haven't had. Not the luck you weren't born with. They are in here. In the unexamined patterns. In the automatic reactions. In the stories you have accepted as truth about who you are and what you deserve and what you are capable of. And here, right here, in this specific recognition, is where everything changes. Because if the chains are yours, if you built them, however unconsciously, then you can take them apart. Not all at once. Not without effort. Not without the daily, patient, sometimes frustrating practice of catching yourself, examining yourself, and choosing differently. But you can. That is the whole point. That is the entire teaching. You are not your anger. You are the one who notices the anger and chooses what to do with it. You are not your anxiety. You are the one who observes the anxiety and decides whether to follow it. You are not the story you've been telling about yourself. You are the one who can pick up that story, read it clearly, and decide whether it's actually true. You have proheresis. You have the faculty of choice. You have, always have had, the one thing that Epictetus proved, in conditions far more difficult than yours, cannot be taken from you. Use it. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not when the circumstances are more favorable. Now. In this specific, imperfect, difficult, unrepeatable moment of your life. That is iron mind. That is what Epictetus left us. And now, it is yours. Epictetus wrote, in the very first lines of the Enchiridion, the first thing he wanted his students to understand, the foundation on which everything else rests. Some things are in our control and others not. 5 words that contain a lifetime of practice. 5 words that, genuinely internalized, not just understood, but lived daily imperfectly, persistently, will change the texture of your entire inner life. You have been carrying chains you didn't know you chose. Now you know. And knowing, if you let it become practice, is the beginning of everything. A slave became the freest mind in history with this understanding. An emperor governed the most powerful civilization on earth with this understanding. And you, wherever you are, whatever you are carrying, whatever chains you have built around yourself, have access to the same truth they built their lives on. Some things are in your control. Everything else, release it. That is the whole practice. That is iron mind. Subscribe. Come back. The work continues. Stay sharp. Stay strong. Iron mind.